According to Gregory Orose, who is calls himself the pragmatic engineer who writes a tech newsletter, Netflix will be bringing an end to its 25-year policy of a single staff level for all its software engineers. The company made the decision to change the hierarchy of its software engineers after facing a number of hurdles, according to one of which is costs. Joining us to discuss that, corporate culture, one of the world's biggest streaming companies, Sanyade Okoli, CEO of Alpha African Advisory. Thank you so much for joining us. So, starting with Netflix, what do you make of this, I guess, removing, or rather, no, a single level of staff, a single hierarchy for all their staff? What do you make of that?
As you can see, it's been a 25-year policy,
yeah.
And you've got to, well, you might not be able to, but cast your mind back to the working environment 25 years ago,
yeah.
Where it was actually quite hierarchical. So this was a big thing where they were obviously coming up with flatter levels,
yeah.
Which was more appealing to people. But I must admit, based on my own corporate experience in the last year or so,
yeah.
I get the move to having more levels, because obviously, I run Alpha African Advisory,
right.
Financial advisory business. We started with a typical investment banking structure, analyst, associate, VP, etc., relatively flat. But last year, my guys came to me and said that they wanted to see more levels because they felt like they weren't growing. So being on one level for several years made them feel like, what's happening?
Right.
Peers in other organizations are feeling like they're being promoted from year to year. And they felt like they were stagnant with the flatter structure we had.
Yeah.
So I think that must be part of what has informed what Netflix is doing.
Okay. So to that point, there was an internal email that has been gotten a hold of. We'll take a look at that. They placed the number. They made, I guess, a justification for why it is that they've done it. So Netflix has evolved and grown in terms of members, employees, and overall complexity. While the business has changed and our organization has grown, we have not evolved the way we build our engineering teams. And then they continued, I believe, in the second part of this email. Said, we believe that additional structure is required to evolve team composition to maximize the impact of our people cost budget. Look, there's a clue. Facilitate more consistency and transparency of our compensation practices and create clarity to guide and recognize growth. And I think then they also listed those different, there we go. So software engineers, security engineers, test engineers, different levels there. So this encapsulates it all.
So I saw three things there.
Yeah.
First of all, bringing clarity to expectations at different levels. Second is greater bang for our buck, i.e. cost, because my understanding was they had a system where, because they were all on one level, even though there were differentials in terms of how much people were paid within that one bracket,
yeah.
Because everybody was a senior software engineer, they couldn't hire cheaper and less experienced people because they would have ended up overpaying.
Yeah.
This gives them the ability to improve the composition of their team. And the third one was the point that I just made, which is greater clarity and helping people to understand what is required for growth and creating that space for growth.
So what about those? So I guess you mentioned employees not feeling like they're growing if they remain on that one particular level. I understand they also had issues in attracting above senior engineer staff as well. What do you make of that hurdle?
I think what it is some people were willing to come when they felt like, okay, everybody's a senior software engineer.
Yeah.
Now they've brought in these levels. It seems like more people felt dissatisfied with the new leveling and where they found themselves than people who were satisfied. And for some of them, with the change in name, they felt like it was almost a demotion compared to where they used to be before. Yeah. So they have had some exits and probably expect some additional exits over the coming months where people feel like the title, they have been given does not match their level of experience or the value that they're bringing.
Interesting. So you need hierarchy in corporate structure when it comes to...
I will not be making any such blanket statements. I will say things need to be fit for purpose. You've got to look at the type of organization and also your team members. You've got to listen.
Yeah.
and make sure you're building structure that is fit for your purpose.
Gotcha. All right. Let's from Netflix. Let's go to this tweet notification from United Bank of Africa. They are essentially saying, for reduced banking hours, customers should, I guess, use their digital channels. Looking ahead, as far as tech is concerned, do you have faith in digital channels for banking and finance to be able to carry the load of less physical visits to an actual bank?
Permit me to take you back.
Okay.
Before I answer.
Okay.
They say for the safety of customers and employees.
Yeah, we still don't know what that means.
What risk are they seeing that we are not seeing?
We reached out to them.
So I think that you could almost camp there. But,
right.
Yeah, but we'll keep it moving.
Yeah.
In answer to your question, it's not just the future, it is today.
Yeah.
So we cannot get away from the use of digital channels. But a few questions came to mind. First of all, remember the literacy rate of a country like Nigeria is about 62%.
Right, that's right.
That means that there are 38% of the adult population that are not literate.
Right.
To what extent can they use these digital channels?
Right.
Secondly, broadband penetration in Nigeria is just a little shy of 45%.
Right.
That means there are 55% that
don't have access to broadband. Right.
So to what extent can they benefit from the digital channels? How effective is their voice technology service so that the people can call and speak in their native languages because they can't actually utilize the online platforms that you and I can use? And I think this move puts a higher burden of care for them to ensure that the disruptions and downtimes of the digital channels are kept to an absolute minimum.
Gotcha.
Because you and I know that time and time again, you're at the shop trying to pay, and I'm not just saying UBA, I'm just saying generally now.
Yeah, of course, banks,
where, it says declined or whatever, when you know that it's a technology issue and not because there's no funds. And to ensure that you're trying to do online transfers, et cetera, it works. Just this week, I was trying to make an urgent payment for my bank, and there was a problem with the platform, both the app on my phone and the online platform. Not good enough when you've reduced the number of hours that your branches are open.
Gotcha. Funny enough, the replies to that tweet, when they tweeted it out, no one asked about the safety. All they were asking about was about transactions, which is, I thought, very...
It's just like, what are they saying that we're not?
Exactly. You think fintechs can take advantage of that, though, with the issues you brought up? Because in fact, our last, because we're talking about Flutterwave and their new switching license they got from the central bank. The last guest right before you, I was asking, we're talking about fintechs and so on. So you think that's an opportunity where they can, or is it the same infrastructure challenge that everybody in the pool is facing?
Yes and yes. So it's not mutually exclusive. Yes, we're all facing the similar challenges, but it also creates opportunities, right, for those who can find alternative ways of surmounting the same challenges.
Very, very interesting conversation around. We could talk tech for the rest of the hour. In fact, we're still talking tech. Twitter. What do we start? Do we start with circles or the edit button? What do you make of the circles, the ability to curate? So maybe if I send tweets, I can only say I didn't want Sanyade Okoli to see my tweets, and I'd be tweeting only to you. What do you make of the circles feature?
It makes a lot of sense. So I'll preface that to say, I must admit, I stopped using Twitter actively a year ago.
Really?
Yes. And that's because I just found that within my own Twitter sphere, so let me not generalize, there was more toxicity than I felt I wanted to deal with in my life.
Right.
And I can see how both the circle and the edit functionality will help so that people can feel more comfortable with tweeting, knowing that I can control the audience if I want to, and also putting tweets out there, recognizing that if I make shock horror, some faux pas or, I shouldn't say faux pas, actually a typo or something, I can go and correct it. But I do know that there is pushback to say, well, first of all, you already have the best edit button you do have, which is delete.
Delete the tweet.
And secondly, they don't want people going there, saying one thing, facing some kind of pushback and quickly backtracking.
It, right.
But then I think Twitter has mitigated that by ensuring that there's an edit history.
Right.
So it states quite clearly, and you can go back and see the original tweet, so
Gotcha.
people can't play games. So overall, I think they're both good ideas.
Fantastic. In fact, you've touched on it. There's a couple tweets. There was an exchange as to, I think it was Keith Olbermann, who is a famous journalist over in the United States, saying that, I think he said, there it is. It says the most dangerous thing you could do. Think what politicians and fascists could do with it. Now, by the way, we should state
the edit history.
Right, there you go. And then I think there was a reply to him. It says they've been able to delete embarrassing tweets from the beginning, and we've been taking screenshots from the beginning, right, to hold them accountable. I don't think this will change much, except allow us to correct annoying and embarrassing typos. Yeah. So I think you were referring to trolls first of all, as far as toxicity. If would that so you're the perfect person to ask this question. Would the edit button? No, yes, with the edit, not the edit button, the circles. Could that bring you back to Twitter? So generally, would that, you think?
But potentially, well, first of all, so I never used to tweet because it's like, whoa, whoa. So I might actually start tweeting.
Yeah.
But it's not just trolls. It's just. Yeah, well, you could call them trolls, but some of it is like, there's a lot of negative energy. And I'll just qualify and say, certainly within the Twitter sphere, that I found myself in.
Right. I have to tell you, us in the media depend heavily on Twitter because it's been called the town square. Do you agree that Twitter is the town square?
Absolutely, and that's where I used to go. So I used to actually use it to check the news because what the traditional media wouldn't tell me. I'll go there and see actually what's trending, what's happening.
Yeah.
Quite funny as well. Yeah. But unfortunately, I've personally found it over the negativity. Yeah. Overweighed the good things for me. This
is a very, very valid point that you bring up because it's been something, and there's a lawsuit right now with Elon Musk and Twitter in court and everything and so on, and he's been attacking them about the number of bots and fake accounts that they have. So it does mean, and that as far as Twitter's valuation is concerned, toxicity, and we can hark back to President Trump and his time there, and what he brought to that level. It's a major hurdle. It's something at Wall Street, and it's not something that can be dismissed.
What you find is freedom of speech is being impaired because people cannot put things without fear of having sometimes far too much pushback, unnecessary, vile pushback. And I think it's a great shame.
Is that a reflection of society?
Absolutely.
So that means we're becoming a more toxic society then, I guess, more politically divided society, and it's reflected online.
Not just politically divided on so many different levels, absolutely, which is where I'll tell you that I think a lot about wholeness and bringing wholeness to people. So
I see your Instagram. You're active on Instagram.
Exactly. Yes, and I talk a lot about wholeness because at the end of the day, we speak from our heart. So if our hearts are toxic, we'll speak toxic things. So it goes back to dealing with what's in our hearts.
That's a great way to end the segment. We'll end it up there. So it's about what's in the hearts. Sanyade Okoli, CEO, Alpha African Advisory, and wellness preacher as well. We'll add that as well. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you coming in. You're watching the Global Business Report here on Arise News. We'll have more for you after the break. Do stay tuned.